We're getting rid of the falsely named renewables. Those big windmills are so pathetic and so bad, so expensive to operate. Most expensive energy ever conceived. And by the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive. They're too expensive. They're too expensive. They're too expensive.
Wow, that sure didn't age well. But it really does beg the question, how did clean energy get so cheap so fast? And what is dirty energy doing to fight back? Not to worry, as a permaculture urbanist, I've got you covered. In this episode, I'll also provide 3 new ways for you to help dirty energy lose faster. Welcome to Edenicity, living cities for a living world. Why is clean energy suddenly so cheap? There's actually a few layers to this. It's cheap, and it's cheap so fast because the price drop is an exponential process. This was first observed by Theodore Paul Wright in 1936 when he was working in an aircraft factory. What he saw was that every time manufacturing doubles, the price drops by a fixed percent. And since then, this has been observed in countless industries, basically any manufactured good with highly repeatable processes. You can think of Moore's Law with computer chips, where the price of 1 unit of computation dropped by 50% every 18 months since 1965. And happily, it's also true of wind and solar power. What's driving this effect? Well, in highly repeatable industrial processes, we learn more by doing more. And that learning can be rolled into lower prices, higher efficiency, more reliability, more safety. And it can actually do all of that at the same time if the manufacturer wants all those things. Now, in the case of solar energy, prices drop 20% every time production doubles. This is called Swanson's Law. Now, there are similar laws for batteries and for wind turbines. Meanwhile, is this true of all forms of energy? No. In fact, quite the opposite. Most of the cost of fossil fuel energy is buying the fuels, and those costs do not obey Wright's law at all. Here's a chart of oil prices since 1965, and since the mid-70s, there's been a 62-fold increase in the price of oil. Other fuels, such as natural gas, methane, are all over the map, with prices rising and falling by a factor of 5, with really no hope of a long-term decline. So if fossil fuel prices are going up and solar prices are coming down, then it stands to reason that there will be an inflection point where solar becomes cheaper than any fossil fuel. And that point has happened in the past. In 2009, for example, a solar power plant would cost 3 times as much as a coal power plant delivering the same amount of energy. But by 2024, a solar power plant cost half as much as a similarly sized coal power plant. Similarly, wind cost 20% more in 2009 and 57% less in 2024. So we are past the inflection point. Solar and wind are cheaper now. And as you might expect, clean energy is growing rapidly worldwide. Now, how fast is it growing? According to Forbes, clean energy is outspending fossil fuels nearly 2 to 1. Digging through their amazing article here, you can see that clean energy is just trouncing them. They have this graph that takes out the subsidies, and even without the subsidies, clean energy is doing great. But we are still early in the game here, because low carbon energy, not even the cleanest energy, is just 19% of total energy expenditures right now. So there's plenty of room for clean energy to grow in the world, especially since much of the world is still energy poor. Now let's talk about how the fossil fuel industry is fighting back and how you can help them lose. Their first line of defense is to shout down all of their clean energy rivals. As you can see in this chart, gas and oil outspent renewable energy 27 to 1. Between 2008 and 2018. And they have done a spectacularly good job seeding the conversation with their talking points. For example, it's fairly common for people to look at Wright's Law and say, well, Wright's Law is basically history. The easy gains are gone. It's certainly going to level out pretty soon. But somebody has already looked at this. I'd like you to meet Auke Hoekstra, who is a senior researcher at Eindhoven University in the Netherlands. What he did was go back through over 2 decades of International Energy Agency World Energy Outlook publications and look at their predictions for clean energy in each of those years. Here's what they looked like. In the early years, you can see that their predictions are all these colored lines that go horizontal. Meanwhile, the reality of the growth of clean energy is that black line that is continuing almost straight up. But these were the early years. What about later years? Well, the effect continued. The energy industry worldwide continued to predict that renewable energy would level out starting in the next year. And the trend continued, and it continued. It's just a crazy graph. Basically, you have the industry's predictions looking like this, and reality almost straight up like a rocket. The industry's predictions are literally orthogonal to the reality of the growth of clean energy. All right, the second biggest whopper I've heard from the dirty energy industry is that we're just trading oil dependence for Chinese solar panel dependence. Now, that is just a chef's kiss of xenophobia and nonsense. Let me show you why. First of all, when you buy a solar panel, you're done for 25 years. There's nothing really more to buy. Meanwhile, with oil, you're buying every month or more, sometimes from hostile countries. That's 25 years times 12 months or more that you're making those purchases, or 300 times more foreign dependence. Besides, the US, India, and Southeast Asia are all scaling their photovoltaic production aggressively. So do you see what they've done? They've seeded an argument with xenophobia, and they managed to be wrong on multiple levels. Here's their final whopper, and that is that I'm just talking about the panel price, not the whole price, and that with all costs included, land, permitting, and so forth, clean energy can't compete. But look, I've actually shown you both. I showed you the panel price, that's the blue line up top, and the system price, that's the very sharply declining red line that crosses everything else. And clean energy still wins. All right, now this final point had multiple levels to it, and I decided to put those in a separate episode, which I will link here when it goes up. Thanks as always to the wonderful patrons for supporting this channel. It is an honor to serve you and everybody who wants to see a long and prosperous future for all life on this planet. Take care, stay green. See you next time.